And we are live. How's it going, Mets and overall baseball fans? Thank you guys so much for chiming in for the latest episode of Bleav in Queens. This time, episode 27. Myself, former New York Met and current MLB Network analyst, that being an Anthony Brecker. And then we, of course, have Joe Serralo from Serralo Sports Talk. This is our first live show here on YouTube. So for people watching audio, listening in audio, rather, if you're wondering why we're answering questions, things of that nature, that's because we are doing a live show. This is a big episode covering the New York Mets, guys, as they are getting set for their postseason play this Friday, in which I'll be in attendance in game one. And then we have the whole potentially 3-game set against the San Diego Padres. So we're going to be doing a deep dive, a preview into the first wildcard round for the New York Mets, along with answering live questions from you guys here in the live show. So I'm really pumped up. This is going to be an exciting episode. So how are you guys doing today? Joe, how's it going?
Going well, man. Going well. Look, 101 wins. It's the second best regular season in franchise history. Obviously, there's some disappointing factors in there. We talked about them last episode. Bummed to have the wild card, but all in all, it was a hell of a season for this team. Hell of a first season for Buck. And, 3 straight wins. I don't care if they were against the Nationals. I don't care if they didn't result in winning the division. 3 straight going into the postseason. I'm amped. I'm ready to go.
3 straight wins, some homers, lots of runs. Bats woke up. Obviously wish that would have happened a little bit sooner, but hey, you know what? It happened, and it's good to get that going right before the playoffs. You got some good things as a player to look back on and feel confident about going into this series against the San Diego Padres. So,
absolutely. And Joe, before we start to deep dive this wild card round for the New York Mets against the Padres, what do you got for me?
What do I got for you? I got Bet Online for you.
Ooh.
Head on over to our proud sponsors at betonline.ag. Use the promo code Bleav. That's BLEAV for your first time, one time, not 50, but now 100% welcome bonus. Any deposit between $50 and $1,000, Bet Online will match in full. Head on over to betonline.ag. Let the games begin.
All right, now that's Bleav.
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 That's French for believe. Bleav.
Yep.
Bleav. Blah. Okay.
But not like French. That's more like Quebecois French, like Bleav.
Ooh.
Because they all at the end of every word.
Again, shout out everyone.
Historian.
We got over 200 live viewers right now. So, guys, we're going to be getting your questions a little bit later in the show. But before we do, all I ask is make sure to smash that like and subscribe on. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get the podcast as well. You will probably be seeing, hopefully, more live shows like this, depending on how deep in the playoffs the New York Mets go. Fingers crossed that their postseason run doesn't end as soon as this weekend. But, guys, I want to ask, starting with you, Rec, we initially were not expecting postseason to start this soon for the New York Mets. Now they're starting things this Friday. And we have an idea what pitching matchups look like for the Mets and to an extent for the Padres. So overall, before we really deep dive the nitty gritty about the series, what's just your raw reaction and analysis quickly on this matchup between these two teams?
Well, I think you've got 2 fantastic teams as far as talent goes. Like the starting pitching and the matchups we're about to see. Obviously, the 3 coming from the Mets side, we've seen them all year. Well, parts of the year, I should say. DeGrom, Scherzer, Bassett. In some order or another. I know that's kind of still up in the air. I'm hearing all kinds of different possibilities. But realistically, in some order, it'll at least be those 3. And then on the other side, you got Snell, you got Musgrove, and of course, and Darvish is going game 1. He is, on the docket for the San Diego Padres. He will be in their game 1. So I think you've got a stellar pitching matchup from that perspective. Then you look at the lineups. This Mets team, they've scored runs. They've done it kind of unconventionally, not with the power numbers. This San Diego Padres team, they have scored runs, but at times they seem to go in and out, even after they've made these trades and fortified their lineup. And they have a ton of guys who can hit home runs and a ton of guys who can, affect the game at any time. For whatever reason, they still haven't really caught fire. They've been a little bit better of late. Then you look at the bullpens, and realistically, I think this San Diego team in their bullpen, look, Hader has not been great in the back end, obviously, since he came over. Been a little bit better of late, but realistically, that's kind of a question mark for them. And outside of Edwin Diaz in the Mets bullpen, I would say that they've been okay, a little bit of a question mark there. So I think you've got 2 really similar teams, to be honest with you, 2 teams that line up very well together. And to me, it's all going to be about who can come up with the runs, who can find some offense, and how can you get it there? How can you get it done? Is it going to be Soto working his way on base with guys like Machado and Drury driving him in, or is it going to be the Mets and doing what they've done all year and stringing together some hits and finding ways to get on base, and really Lindor and Alonso being the two that have driven in runs for this Mets team all year long? Is Starling Marte going to be healthy? Is he going to be able to play? There's a lot of things that go into the series that we don't know about. Unknown entities. How will these players and teams perform in the playoffs and under pressure that they have not been under before? Because a lot of them have never seen the playoffs, have never played in games like this. So it's going to be very interesting to see, how these two teams end up kind of stacking up to one another. But I can tell you, it's going to be a great, great series.
So, Joe, before I pivot to you, I just want to say that there are actually a bunch of updates that I'll be sharing shortly regarding some of these uncertainties. But before I do, going back to you, Joe, let me hear it. What's your thoughts on this matchup for the Mets facing off against the Padres team that certainly did have their number in the regular season, but as we discussed in the last podcast, anything can happen. Again, when the Cubs sweep the Mets in the regular season and the Mets sweep the Cubs in the postseason in 2015, that's just one of numerous examples that truly, when it comes to postseason, anything and everything is on the table.
Yeah, excuse the bluntness in the expression here, but the regular season doesn't mean shit anymore,
yep,
right? 101 wins for the Mets was great. 88 wins for the Padres was disappointing. Doesn't mean squat anymore. You look at the Padres, and this is an entirely different team from the last time these two teams faced off, right? They had 3 in June. They had 3 in July. Blake Snell was a shell of himself. He was stinking it up in the first half. Now he's one of the hottest pitchers on the planet. Joe Musgrove had an all-star first half. Second half, stunk. So completely different Padres team. You look at the lineup, it's totally different. Josh Bell, who was the guy who I wanted first and foremost above anyone not named Juan Soto, obviously, at the trade deadline. Josh Bell's hitting $190 as a member of the Padres. Juan Soto hitting .236 with just 16 RBI as a member of the Padres. How about Brandon Drury? He's probably the best addition that they've made, at least statistically. He's only hitting about 240, but 8 homers, 28 stakes with San Diego. So completely different lineup. It's been flipped on its head. It's vastly underperformed, but the pitching has gotten a lot better. So that's how the Mets have to beat the Padres. Got to beat them with pitching. It's official. Like you just said, they're all over the chat with it. Max Scherzer's the game one guy. Go set the tone. Because in the Mets' last 21 games with Scherzer and DeGrom on the bump, they're only 11-10, and that is freaking unacceptable. Scherzer
sounds like very much a Mets thing to do, unfortunately.
Right. It's unacceptable. Scherzer is going to go out there, and I firmly believe he's going to set the tone, even though Yu Darvish in 2 starts against the Mets this year has like a .6 ERA. Like I said, the regular season doesn't matter anymore. Max versus Darvish, game 1, give me Max 10 times out of 10, and then who knows what goes on the rest of the way. Hopefully, with a win, it's Bassett game 2. I know there's been rumors of if the Mets go up 1-0, Bassett game 2. If they go down 0-1, DeGrom game 2. We'll see what happens there. And, hopefully it's one of those games where Snell can't find the strike zone because he's so talented when it comes to command and control. He really is his own worst enemy. That's the only way to beat him is to get him, run that pitch count up in the 4th, 5th inning, get him out early because he can't locate. So we'll see. A lot of things have to go the Mets' way, but it's not like San Diego's come in and been world beaters. This is a team that has the talent to win 100 games, didn't even win 90. So I think the Mets, especially being at home here with the pitching that they have in a short series, have the advantage.
Yeah, and let's stay on the emphasis of pitching for a second, because you brought up Snell, for example, and Snell was someone who did not have at all a good first half of the season. Since then, though, he's been one of the Padres' best pitchers outside of Yu Darvish. I mean, he's only gotten better and better if you look at his numbers through July, August, September, then in his 1 start here in October. He's been absolutely nails. And let's not forget also, again, not that regular season matters when it comes to postseason play, but the Mets did face Snell this year, and last time they did was at home, and Snell pitched a pretty good game. That was like the start of him in the second half, really starting to get on a roll. And for the Mets, this was something that I described a lot in my post-game show last night, I'm pretty sure, how it's unfortunate how the Mets have had nails from Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom for the most part, and Bassett all year long. And then you look at that Braves matchup, a playoff-type atmosphere in Atlanta, and none of them show up nearly to the degree that you're expecting. So these uncertainties arise out of really nowhere, a bad time for the Mets. But starting with you, Rec, when you look at especially game 1 of this matchup, it's supposed to be Yu Darvish, who had his best season statistically since 2014. He has been absolutely lights out for San Diego for the majority of the season, facing off against Mad Max, who, again, had one of his worst starts of the year back in Atlanta last time he was out there. How do you expect game 1 to go? Because for me, I don't view that as anything other than a pitching duel. And as someone that will be in attendance for this game, as much as I love to see high-flying offense, I find it far-fetched. Again, I'll gladly be proven wrong, but this really feels like a game that's going to be tight from the start to the absolute finish, given these starters.
It should be, but look, we've seen you Darvish in the playoffs get absolutely shelled. We've seen Max in his last start not look so good, give up some home runs. So to me, yes, this should be a pitching duel. This should be one where we're looking at a 2-1, 3-2 type of ball game late in the game, and it comes down to the back end of the bullpen and who can lock it down, who can get it done. And of course, to me, I don't care if you have Josh Hader, the way he's looked at times this year, the way Edwin Diaz has been all year. I would take him 100 times out of 100, at least as of right now. So to me, it's going to be a really, really big first game. I think this wild card series, all these wild card series are, because it's only 3 games and they're all going to be at Citi Field for this series. They're all going to be at obviously the higher seeds home field for each of these series. I think they all come down to who can win game 1, and that sets you up so much more favorably for these next 2 games and kind of the way you can go about strategizing. We're talking about maybe not even using DeGrom game 2. I do want to get into that, but for now, as far as this game 1, I think a lot rides on this. Look, you lose game 1, it's not over. Don't get me wrong, but you have more of an advantage than just being up 1-0. You can go ahead and manipulate the way that you're setting up your team, try to do different things, whatever it is you want to do, whatever your advantages are. You can try to do different things to set yourself up, potentially for that division series.
Absolutely. Now, Joe, for you, what are you looking for most in the game 1 matchup between Scherzer, Darvish, and also from the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I'm looking for the bats, honestly. We've talked about the pitching, right? And these guys are both aces in their own right. Obviously, Max, a future Hall of Famer, and Darvish, not going to probably get to Cooperstown one day, but still a damn good pitcher. It's all going to come down to, can this team hit? I mentioned Darvish has a .64 ERA against the Mets in the regular season. And I've already said it twice. I'll say it a third time. Regular season doesn't mean anything here, but can the Mets hit against, a plus opponent? We've seen the bats go dormant against the Braves last weekend. We've seen the bats go dormant, of all places, at Yankee Stadium. When the Mets play a plus opponent, can they hit? This series against the Nationals, there was really no pressure, right? I know that maybe there was a glimmer of hope Monday when the Marlins beat the Braves in that opening game, but we all knew the Marlins weren't going to sweep the Braves. So there was no pressure, and they absolutely lit up the scoreboard their last 3 games in these past 2 days. Can they keep the bats rolling? There's going to be no Starling Marte, and that was a big reason why I really was so hell-bent on winning this division, right? It was Max, it was Jake, it was Marte. Get those 3 guys the extra rest. Well, Max and maybe Jake are going to pitch. Starling Marte is not going to play. Can the rest of the guys step up? There's going to be some guys in that lineup who, maybe wouldn't be in your ideal postseason lineup, but can everyone do their job, step up, and hit? And can they also hit to their strengths, right? Right now, I don't want to see this team necessarily do what they've been doing all year and string together singles, right? Leave that to Jeff McNeil, by the way. Congrats on the National League batting title, the MLB batting title as well. McNeil, 326, led the bigs on the season.
So happy for him.
He's the best. He's got the perfect stroke, perfect swing to win the batting title. It was only a matter of time. But can guys like Alonso and guys like Lindor, can they swing for the fences a little bit? I'm not saying jump out of your shoes every pitch, but I'm saying you just saw how the Braves beat you. You had more hits than the Braves. You had a better collective team batting average than the Braves. You went 0-3 against them over the weekend. Try a little bit. I know it kind of goes against what the team's done all year, and I know that they had a successful year, but Lindor, up until yesterday when he homered against Washington, hadn't hit one since the Milwaukee series? I mean, swing for the fences a little bit. Try, because a guy like Darvish, it's going to be really hard to string together singles against him. So you're going to need that big swing. You're going to need that power stroke. And I want to see a little pop out of this lineup this weekend.
Yeah, I think that's an understatement, right? Because you have the top dogs for the Padres from an offensive standpoint. It's Juan Soto. And regardless of the fact that Juan has been overall underwhelming since arriving in San Diego, he knows Citi Field really well. It's his favorite park to hit in, as is Trey Turner's, as is a lot of former Nationals, as a matter of fact. So it would be the least bit surprising if Soto comes up in a big stage like he has done so well, of course, back when he won the World Series with the Nationals as a youngster, and he still is a youngster. And then you have Manny Machado, another guy where as long as he is locked in, he's a guy that's always going to be a home run threat, a doubles threat. They have the offensive pieces there for the Padres, but they, again, are a team that have been through plenty of deep slumps this year. And in part, the Mets have too. They're teams that, again, stylistically match up somewhat similar, absolutely. And not just from an offensive standpoint, but Rec, for you, we saw this report come out from Joel Sherman today. It's basically made official now, as Joe alluded to earlier, how should the Mets win game 1, they will then throw out Chris Bassett as their game 2 starter. If the Mets lose game 1, then Jacob deGrom is the likely starter. So the point is that if the Mets face any elimination game in either game 2 or 3, they're likely going to put out Jake. And best case scenario, knock on wood, if they sweep that 2-game set, then they'll have Jake ready to pitch game 1 of the NLDS. So do you think that is the right move by Buck to only put Jake in if it's an elimination game? Because in my opinion, I feel that's probably the best route to go, but I am curious to hear what your stance is.
I understand why that is the best route to go from the standpoint of trying to plan out your game plan, your strategy. What are we going to do? How can we make this work in our favor? Where can we find an advantage? Potentially have Jake for game 1. Blah 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 blah. I've seen coaches try to do this stuff before, and you know what? This is the playoffs, and if something doesn't go your way, or let's say you split the first 2. And Jake ends up starting game 3, you've put yourself in a situation where you've put all your chips in his basket. I get that. That's great. He's the best pitcher on the planet. But he's shown some cracks recently. And I'm not saying that means you shouldn't trust him, but I am saying that it's one game. It's baseball. Put your best foot forward. Get the win if you can in 2 games. End the wild card series in 2 games if you can. And go on to the next one and then figure it out from there. Don't try to get cute. I've seen this happen too many times. I could go back to my college days. I'm actually wearing my I didn't even plan that. I can go back to I remember there was a game. We were in the playoffs. We were in the regionals, and there was a rainstorm coming. And my head coach was so smart. He's going to start somebody else, some schmuck who literally pitched once all year. Sorry, Dan, if you're watching. I didn't mean to call you a schmuck, but literally he starts Dan Meyer. Kid pitched one time the whole year. He throws him in there in a regional game because, it's about to rain and we're going to get rained out. We're only going to get an inning in. We don't want to waste our starting pitcher or our ace starting pitcher in this game. Guess what? Didn't rain. We get our doors blown off. We never had a chance, and we're out of the playoffs. Look, I've seen it happen in pro ball too. I'm just saying, you're outthinking yourself. Put your best foot forward. Go out there. This is winner take all. That's what the playoffs is. You don't get another shot. Yes, it's a 3-game series. You can lose 1. Yay. Well, guess what? If you're saving DeGrom to the last game, we thought when they had these 3 lined up against the Braves, we'd win 1 game, right? It didn't work out that way. Don't play that game. Put your best foot forward. I don't care if it's Scherzer or DeGrom game 1. I would prefer it to be DeGrom because that's the way they were set up to begin with. So why switch it up? But I would go DeGrom, then Scherzer, then Bassett. Go with it. See what happens. I don't like the idea of kind of hoping that we can outthink this system and be the one to have Jake start game 1 of the NLDS, because realistically, you have to get there first.
See, I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. And I was under the impression that up until we saw this report earlier today, that was what we were getting. Jake and Max in game 1 or 2 in any fashion. Max is a guy that I trust more than most pitchers to start game 1 of a wild card game as is, but same exactly can be said for Jake. Now, the thing that I do slightly disagree is just the notion of the Mets aren't necessarily just setting up Jake for the NLDS game 1 should they get there. I think this would be a bigger concern if they would be starting Bassett game 2 no matter the result of game 1. That is, in my opinion, the bigger concern, because if that was the case, and God forbid, a worst case scenario, you throw out Max game 1 and then you throw out Bassett game 2 and you get swept somehow. Like, say they both underperform for whatever reason, then you're going to go all off season wondering what could have been if you start Jake in one of those first 2 games. That is not going to be the scenario, at least what we're told at this juncture. But I agree in the notion of my initial thought process was that, yes, it would be Max and it would be Jake no matter what for the first 2 games. So I was a little taken back when I initially saw what was reported today. Now, Joe, do you tend to agree or disagree with Rec here?
I was on the fence, and after hearing everything Rec said, it's impossible to disagree with that, because especially when you've played the game at the highest level, like Rec has, it's, let's not get cute. Let's not listen to what fans think, what people playing MLB The Show want to manipulate their fake franchise pitching staff to do, right? Just go out there and win the fucking game, right? And the 2 guys that give you the best chance to win the fucking game, Max and Jake. And I'll even say, Rec, to your point of game 1 being the most important game in the series, right now I trust Max the most. And I know that Max got hit against the Braves and whatnot. Right now, I just think mentally, and this is no disrespect to Jacob deGrom, mentally, I think Max Scherzer is the toughest pitcher on the planet. And I trust him the most game one to go out there and to be a dog and to attack and to not be intimidated by Juan Soto or Manny Machado or anyone else. I think Scherzer game one, I think it's a great move. I know, Rec, you're not a fan of maybe switching the order of Jake and Max, but I think, honestly, with both of those guys, whatever extra rest either one of them can get, they'll take. So I don't think Jake necessarily minds the extra rest, but I would run Jake out there game two. Because also, if you think about it, if the Mets win with Max and Jake, I know in the back of some people's minds, it's, well, what if it goes to a rubber game and then you have Bassett versus Musgrove? And I get that. Worry about that if it happens. But if the Mets win with Max and Jake, then you're set up with Bassett game one against the Dodgers. And, you figure it out the rest of the way. You probably go Bassett, Max, Jake, tie or Cookie, and then back to Bassett, or maybe your game two starter on short rest, coming out of the pen, whatever, right? If you go Max, Bassett, and then he loses, and then Jake game three, or if you go to 3 games in any which order, all of a sudden you're running out Ty and Cookie game one. And the Dodgers probably going to shellac you to set the tone for the NLDS. So, yeah, go out there, win the first 2. And the 2 guys who give you the best shot to win the first 2 are Max and Jake. So, Rec, I agree wholeheartedly with everything that you just said.
Okay, so talking about pitching decisions, not only from the rotation side, but especially the bullpen, because I think that's the biggest question mark that us fans, and of course you, Rec, especially, we want to find out for. And we're going to have more certainty as we get closer to the day that we're not recording that then. But what we do know is that we saw originally after Trevor Williams was originally supposed to start today, there was a 1-hour rain delay. That led Michael Givens to be the essential spot starter in doing so. Now, the Mets haven't seen Givens in a while as he came off of the COVID IL. And in doing so, another guy, a reliever, is now going on that same IL, this time in Tyler McGill. So McGill is not going to be made available for the postseason roster for wild card. And who knows what NLDS will be there. But Trevor Williams, who pitched fantastic all year, pitched around, I believe, 6 innings today. In doing so, he's not going to be available on the wild card roster as well for the bullpen. So, Rex, starting out with you, what is the best bullpen configuration, in your opinion, with the uncertainties of guys, especially like Taijuan Walker and Carlos Carrasco?
Yeah, I think this is a fun one for me because I know people like to talk about 6th inning guy, 7th inning guy, 8th inning guy, 9th inning guy, yada, yada, yada. I don't care about that anymore. We are at the point where it's time to get guys out. We've seen Buck use Edwin Diaz to get the best part of the lineup out, even if it's in the 8th inning at times this year. It has happened. I'm okay with that. Get the best part of these lineups out with the best guys you have available in the bullpen, or the best possible matchups. If that's David Peterson coming out and facing some lefties, he's looked a little bit better of late out of the bullpen. If it's Edwin Diaz, go to Edwin Diaz. If you've got, for this matchup with the Padres, if you've got guys like Soto, Machado, Drury, Bell, whoever, if you've got that core 3 or 4 in the middle, due up in the 8th inning, Edwin Diaz is coming in the game. I'm sorry, but that's where I'm going. And then I'll get the rest of the out somewhere else. So to me, when you talk about a configuration, for the most part, the bodies that are available are going to be the ones that are on this roster. It's not going to be a big surprise. So to me, it's just all about making sure that it's matchup related. You have reasons for everyone you bring in the game. You have specific parts of the lineup where Edwin can enter, where Drew Smith can enter, where whoever it is, where Ottavino enters, where I don't know. I hope Joel E. Rodriguez isn't on this roster, but
I think he's going to be, though.
I know. That's what I mean by bodies, like having bodies available. Like literally that's where you're at right now. And that's okay. It's just, you got to find the right matchups for these guys and just stick to that. Don't worry about what inning it is. Don't worry about having Edwin Diaz. Oh, he's got to close the game. He doesn't have to close the game. That's not the way this works anymore. I know that is a harder out to get. The 27th out is a harder out to get. But you also have guys in this bullpen, Seth Lugo, Ottavino, who have closed out games in the past. They've done it. So they can do it. It's just a matter of, because to be honest with you, let's face it, has Edwin Diaz ever closed out a postseason game? No. Like, it's a little bit different. So we're going to have to see how this all plays out. But realistically, to me, it's about the matchups. It's about using your best against their best and matching them up so that your strengths versus their weaknesses plays out.
So, and by the way, correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, Tyler. I just want to jump in really quick. But in that series against the Braves, didn't the bullpen look really damn good? Wasn't Lugo the only guy who got touched up that entire series?
Yeah. And realistically, honestly, it was both teams' bullpens were amazing. The starting pitching is where all the runs were scored, which is amazing because we thought that was the Mets' biggest strength. We knew the Braves had a good bullpen, but we thought we'd be able to get to their starting pitching, and maybe our bullpen might be the more vulnerable part. But it's funny how it worked out.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I think Lugo's homer to Matt Olson was the only run a Met reliever gave up. So, and Tyler, again, I'm really sorry, but
no, you're good.
The configuration of this bullpen, right? Figure 13 pitchers going to be on the roster. Your 5 starters, because Cookie and Ty interchangeably, one will make it as a reliever and whatnot. Leaves you with 8 spots left. You got Diaz, Ottavino, Lugo, Trevor May looked encouraging against the Braves. He was a question mark when he came off the IL, but he looked great.
And he pitched scoreless today too.
Michael Givens has looked better, fresh off the IL himself, the COVID list after a 21-day hiatus, but he looked better right before going on that list. Drew Smith has looked good. David Peterson's looked a little better coming out of the pen. Also can dial it up 96, 97 when he's out of the pen. So right there, that's 7 guys. Leaves you with one more spot to play with. So whether that's a Trevor Williams, whether it's, Joely, I mean, there's a good chance that last guy won't even be used or be needed. So I don't think in losing Tyler McGill, no offense, I love Tyler McGill. I don't think he'll be missed all that much because, just to be honest, ever since he came back to the big leagues, he really just wasn't effective. So, let his offseason begin early. Let him get ready for next year, whether that's as a starter or a reliever. But they've got viable pen pieces who really down the stretch, as poorly as we can say the team performed, the bullpen actually looked pretty good down the stretch this season.
So what I want to mention here was, if we're focused on the wild card series first and foremost, which should be the Mets mentality, obviously, Rec, do you think the Mets should have one of Cookie or Ty in the bullpen to start, or have them both completely off the roster and then you reassess things if you get to the NLDS?
No, I think you need one of them on the roster. I think you have to have one of them there just in case anything happens to any of the other starting pitchers. Obviously, if somebody gets hurt, you can replace them. You can't replace them that game. So let's say Max goes out there and second inning, his back gives out. No offense to Max. He's a little bit older now. He's still younger than me. So you know where I'm coming from here. But literally, it's happened. He's had back issues. If he goes out there, he starts struggling because he's got back issues. Who are you going to bring in to eat innings? The first game of a 3-game set, 3 in a row, all in one place. You have to have a guy who can eat up innings, and that's where you would have to have one of these guys at least available to you. Yes, if Trevor Williams is on the roster, of course you could use him. That'd be great. David Peterson's on the roster. Of course you could use him, but you might want to have those guys for something else down the road. You might want to have them ready for something. So you just have one of those starters available. You don't need both. You have 4 starters for this one. That's plenty, just in case one of these other guys goes down and you need someone to really start this game and do a good job.
What about you, Joe?
It's funny. I would actually disagree, and I would keep both on the roster. Just, because say Saturday is Taijuan Walker's scheduled bullpen day, right? And say, the series does go 3 games with the Mets and the Padres, and all of a sudden either Ty or Cookie is your game 1 starter for the Dodgers. Bring Ty out there for an inning. Have him throw 15, 20 pitches. And if he's only out there an inning, maybe he's pumping 96, 97. I actually would keep them both out there just because in a high leverage situation at the end of the day, I'd probably rather see Taijuan Walker out there to get 3 outs than, anyone not named Edwin Diaz or not named Adam Ottavino.
See, for me, it's interesting because when looking at the wild card series alone, there is a rightful argument that neither of those 2 pitchers will even be in the bullpen for the Mets. It really is a toss-up right now. Again, we're going to find out. But, okay, let's say at minimum you have one of Ty or Cookie. I'd imagine it might be tied between the 2 based on just how anything can go in the wild card round. Who do you kick from the bullpen then if you're Buck in that situation? Because you have David Pearson, you have Drew Smith, you have Trevor May, you have yada, yada, yada. Who's the best guy to leave out in that scenario then?
To me, it's Joely Rodriguez. I don't even think it's a question. That's just the way that he has struggled with command at times this year, the way he has struggled with giving up hits, big hits at times this year. I don't see anybody else who I trust a guy like Trevor Williams over him. If you're worried about having a lefty, that's what you've got David Peterson for. At times, Ottavino is great against lefties. So there's different matchups that you can utilize to basically kind of fill that gap, if you will. And especially with Peterson kind of starting to throw the ball the way he is, I think that's your guy against lefties. I would trust him way before I would trust Joely Rodriguez.
Yeah, I mean, I just went through all the guys before, right? That was including Ty and Cookie both being on the roster. All those guys, there's room for everyone. So, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to Joely versus Trevor Williams. Now, Joely might be the guy against the Padres just because Williams threw 60 pitches today against Washington.
Williams is not going to be in the bullpen for the wild card. I'm telling you right now.
But then again, I mean, if you have 13 pitchers for 3 games, right? It doesn't matter who that last guy is because whether it's Joely or Trevor Williams, good chance neither of them see the field. For the NLDS, should the Mets make it, I would go Trevor over Joely and wouldn't think twice about it. Peterson, you got to live with having one lefty in the pen. Use him when it counts, and have that guy be Peterson, not Joely Rodriguez.
From an offensive standpoint now, the Mets have some questions for sure. I mean, we saw in game 2, for example, the guy who did not look great for the most part. Again, it was very small sample size in Atlanta. Francisco Alvarez, he had himself his first home run, his first double, both against righties as well. And that home run was a hanging curveball, but it was from arguably the best reliever the Nationals have. And I Bleav, what's his name? Edwards Jr.?
Carl Edwards?
Yeah, Carl Edwards. He only had like a 2.7 ERA this year. Then he ripped a 108-mile-per-hour double off the wall to left the second time he had his at-bat. Alvarez today as well didn't do anything crazy. Mark Vientos had a couple base knocks. So you look at the Mets DH options, it's according to Buck, Marte is not completely ruled out. Now, he was, of course, fielding, taking some catches and doing some soft tosses back in right field today. There hasn't been much that has changed on his stats. Naturally, as a biased fan, I'm just fingers crossed that Buck out of nowhere drops Marte in the lineup for like game 2 or if game 3 if needed for the wild card. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself here. But Darren Ruff is another guy that's going to be coming off the COVID list soon that I know we have our personal feelings about. He is still an option according to Buck. So for you guys, when evaluating the DH, looking at Tyler Naquin as well, who's been a strikeout machine once again, unfortunately. He's so hit or miss. In your opinion, starting with you, Rec, what is the best option from an offensive standpoint for the Mets? Do you feel that Francisco Alvarez is worthy to at least be considered on this wildcard roster? And in comparison to the Naquins, to, the Vientoses, the Ruffs, like, what do you think is best for them, especially when they match up against a guy like Blake Snell?
Well, it's interesting. I haven't put the roster in front of me and done like a cut down on this yet. But realistically, first of all, when I think about Starling Marte and his availability for this series, I know we're talking about, his finger, and that's what we're looking at. Will he be available? Why not have him available as at the very worst as your pinch runner? You don't have to use Gore in that role. You can have Marte available for that, and if he feels better by game 3, use him. So he goes on the roster for me, and then you kind of see what happens because this guy can steal bases. Like, don't get me wrong. This guy can run. I would trust him over anybody else on this roster, even Gore. I know Gore is lightning fast and the dude can steal bases, but I would still give it the edge to Marte because he's just done it more at the big league level. So why not give him that opportunity and to just be on the roster anyway? And then when you go from there, when I talk about the DH spot, it's basically – this is tough because when you bring up Alvarez in the last week of the season, you have no idea what you're getting. The kid looked like he was trying too hard in the Atlanta series. Understandable. That goes without saying. It's part of the game. Like, guys are going to do that. Pete does that sometimes still. That happens to the best of them. It was a really weird time to bring him up, and I saw at-bats that I didn't like, that he was swinging way too hard, trying to do way too much. And then I think about the fact that, okay, that was a couple days ago. Now we're heading to the playoffs. The pressure is going to be even higher. Yes, he had a nice game here against the Nationals in a zero pressure situation. Great. He needed that. Maybe that helps him settle down. Maybe it doesn't. The Mets don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. Even if you're in the cage with him and you're talking to him, you don't know how he's going to respond until he's out there. That's just the way it is.
Right.
Vientos, it's kind of similar. I mean, at least he's had a much longer leash and a much, the Mets have had a lot more time to kind of evaluate him as the season's gone on. I like his at-bats. I haven't seen him over swinging. I haven't seen him look like he's trying to do too much out there. Oftentimes he's pretty well controlled. I think he does a nice job, controlling the strike zone. He's got some pop in his bat. Realistically, unfortunately for Darren Ruff, it just hasn't worked out here in New York. I love him. I think he's a great person. I think he's a great player, especially against lefties, but all the time. I think he needed to play more against righties. I think that was part of the problem. But unfortunately, I just don't think he ends up making this roster. And I would give the edge. I'm always going to give the edge to potential over a known quantity because that's just kind of how I am. I like that idea of giving guys who could be the greatest thing in the world a chance to go and prove it. So realistically, I take a little bit of a risk there, and I go with a guy like Alvarez or Vientos or both, to make this roster, and that's just the way I look at it.
See, I like to hear that. What about you, Joe?
I can't say I agree on this one because when I look at Alvarez's at-bats against Atlanta, look, what he did against the Nationals was great. Hit a ball 450. It was a moonshot piss missile. It was great. It was beautiful. It came in a game that didn't mean anything. You know what? I actually thought the best thing I saw from Alvarez, in the final week of the season was that today, I don't know how he finished the game, but his first 2 at-bats, he walked in both of them. It's like, where was that?
He was taking pitches. He was looking good.
I mean, he was swinging at pitches that started low and away, sliders that started low and away.
It was a jitterbug. Come on.
Don't come on me when you got swept and you needed one win.
I know.
Don't come on me there.
I know.
I mean, look, I love Francisco Alvarez. I think he is the future of this team, whether it's behind the dish or at the DH position. I think he's going to be a Met opening day next year for a long time coming. I just don't want to see him or Vientos on this playoff roster. Similarly, I don't want to see Ruff on this playoff roster. I need a little more. So
who the hell are you putting?
I need a little more defensive
versatility. Your Joe.
I'm taking Marte and Terrence Gore. on this playoff roster. Guillorme is obviously your superhuman utility infield guy. And then, McCann and Nido are going to be the catchers. I'm sorry. I'd rather see Alvarez over McCann. I'll tell you that. I'd rather see Alvarez over McCann, but it's not going to happen. I'm trying to be realistic.
Can't do that. Yeah, you can't do that.
I know.
It's not going to happen. So I'm trying to be realistic here. And if it comes down to that final spot, a Marte, a Gore, and Alvarez, a Vientos, I just don't think I trust the young guys. I certainly don't trust Ruff. Give me Gore. Give me Marte. Even if Marte isn't ready to swing a bat game 1, but can swing a bat game 3, I'm going to take him for that reason.
So,
guys, I just want to bring this up just because you kind of mentioned it there, Joe.
Okay.
With Alvarez and him taking a walk. Do you know how many walks he had this year in the minor leagues?
How many?
70 in 411 at bats. That's a really good rate. That's a very high rate of walks. So what I will say is when this guy finally does get comfortable, he is not going to swing at everything. We heard, I think it was John Smoltz talking about how he's going to swing at everything. Oh, he swings at everything. He doesn't swing at everything, guys. He actually has a very, very good idea of the strike zone. He just got excited. That happens. That could happen again in the playoffs. I trust a guy, though, who at least understands and knows how to go up there with an approach to figure that out, to make an adjustment. And not to mention, and you said this, he's going to be an integral part of this future for this franchise. Give him the opportunity to at least get an at-bat or 2. Maybe they're meaningless at-bats. Maybe the game's in hand. Maybe they are up by 8 or down by 8 in one of these games, and he gets an at-bat or 2. And all of a sudden, that helps him out going into the offseason, going into next year. I think that's important. I think people forget how much this game and the mental side of it can weigh on you and can carry over from one season to the next. If he's left off this roster, yes, that could motivate him and get him to work harder. It could also send him in a different direction. And I'm not saying that says something good about him. You would want him to come back and make, say, hey, don't forget about me. I'm better than that. You would want him to have that attitude, but that doesn't always work out that way. So for me, what I'm saying is I would like to see him be on this roster, even if it's just for confidence alone for him moving forward. That is important too.
So let me ask you this, Rec, because I think you brought up, a good something that you can attest to from personal experience for you as a player, especially when you've been off rosters that you felt that maybe you should have been a part of, whether it was for the Mets or other teams. How did you take that, especially heading into the offseason? Did it vary on the year for you? I'm sure it did as you grew as a player, but I'm curious to know what your mindset was.
I can tell you that in 2015, I was left off all the postseason rosters. Never made a postseason roster.
Yep.
2016, and I truly believe this. My minor league numbers weren't the best of my career, but I had the best and most consistent season of my life. I came back. I was pissed about 2015. I was awful in 2015. So it wasn't just that I got left off the roster. Don't get me wrong. I was terrible in 2015. So I was pissed at my performance that year. And then I was pissed that I did get left off, even though my performance was awful, because I knew I was better than that. And I hoped that people knew I was better than that. Obviously, the Mets couldn't take that chance on me in the postseason. I don't blame them. That is what it is. But for me, it worked out to where 2016 ended up being my best year of my career, at least from an approach standpoint, consistency standpoint. And again, that did end up translating to when I did get called up finally and got a half a season in the big leagues. That was my best year in the big leagues, was 2016. So realistically, it can have a huge impact, and positive or negative. It can go either way. I've had off seasons where things messed with my head, and I ended up going into the season and I was awful. Things didn't work for me. So it is, you want to say, oh, be tougher than that, be stronger than that. It's great to think that in theory, but when you're actually going through these things, it's a little bit different than that, and it can affect you.
So who was the guy in 15? Was that Rene Rivera?
No. That was just Plawecki and d'Arnaud. They both run the roster because Plawecki came up. So what happened earlier that year when d'Arnaud got hurt, they called up Plawecki. I think it was in May, I want to say. So it was pretty early in the season. And I had been putting together good ABs, but I hadn't had many results at that point. And so when they called Plawecki up, I didn't have – they wanted – well, he was kind of the prospect anyway. So they wanted to give him the leash and let him be the starter. And part of what I think, my problem that year was that I took that like really poorly. You'd think it would motivate you and make you work harder. I already worked my ass off to get to that point, and I was like, why am I not getting this playing time when the starter went down? Like, that's what I'm here for. And so I think I took that poorly, and that ended up bleeding into my play. And I remember Bob Guerin came up to me at one point that year. I don't remember how deep into the season it was, but he was like, were you expecting to be the starter when Trav went down? And I said, yeah, I was expecting, at least not, even if I'm not the starter, at least to share time, like to be out there a little bit more. And when I wasn't, I think that affected me more than I wanted to admit at the time.
Yeah, it makes sense. They went prospect over the quote unquote journeyman, excuse the term. Yeah. But
no, I don't take any offense.
Yeah. Interesting. It's funny when I'm looking at the makeup of the 13 hitters that are going to make this postseason roster, right? I'm trying to think in my head about the best right-handed bat, and I may be swaying a little bit more towards Alvarez than I was. I'm just thinking, you go across the diamond, right? Alonso, McNeil, Lindor, Escobar, Kana, Nimmo. Is Naquin the right fielder? Or are they going to go McNeil, Guillorme?
I don't even, for me, when it comes to Naquin, I mean, it would make sense to have him on this playoff roster for just his defensive ability alone.
Got it. That's a must.
Yeah. But outside of that, though, from an offensive standpoint, I think there's a reason why you're not going to see much of him at all, even in DH spots that maybe he has a favorable matchup. Like, I'm really curious. And that's why I was curious with your response originally, Joe, when you said, you would take Marte and Gore, at least from the righties. So you're telling me that you rather take your chances with Vogelback, which, again, is not a bad idea. But, again, there's rightful criticism, too, say against Snell, lefty on lefty, or for whatever lefties that the Padres threw out there. So that's something that I'm curious to hear what your take is on.
I mean, it's tough. Who do you think is going to give you a better at-bat against Snell or against Josh Hader in the ninth inning? You think Vogelback's going to put together a better EB? Or are you trusting Alvarez going up there?
Who actually has really good numbers against both Snell and Hader?
Who?
Darren Ruff.
Don't do this to me, Tyler.
Don't
do this to me right now.
That's actually true. That's a good point, though, because Ruff has been with San Francisco for the last couple of years. He's seen the San Diego Padres team. We're not coming up with anybody new here in Darvish and Snell. They've been there. And so, that makes sense that he's got some experience against them. And that I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point. I mean, again, though, just the way he's looked, the at-bats haven't really been competitive. That's tough. It's tough. And look, I guess that's really what it comes down to here with this Mets team. And that's, I guess what's almost a little bit disappointing is that one of the things that this organization did a really good job of was trying to build depth without, kind of flushing out the farm, if you will. They did it by trying to bring guys in and doing smaller type deals. And they even did it at the trade deadline, the exact same thing. And in some ways it has worked out, but in a lot of ways it hasn't, unfortunately. And they're just not as deep as you want them to be going into this series.
No, they're not that deep, and they don't have a lot of defensive versatility. That's what I'm worried about as I'm thinking of the
a lot of DHs on this roster.
Right. As I'm thinking of the 4 backups, and I say 4 because, Vogie I'm slating as a starter in the DH spot. One of them's obviously McCann. And then, I want Gore on this roster. Naquin or Guillorme. One of, those 2 guys is going to start depending on where McNeil plays.
It's Guillorme. I'm sorry.
You're thinking McNeil in right field, Guillorme at second?
No, no. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were going for a starter. I thought you were saying just the roster in general. Are you talking about the starting?
Yeah, I'm saying one of them's going to start, one's going to be a backup, but they're both going to make it. Naquin and Guillorme. Yeah. They're both going to make it. So then that leaves essentially 2 spots for Gore, Marte, Alvarez. And it's like you carry Alvarez, you're losing defensive versatility. Then you got 3 catchers. You take Marte, you don't know if he can play at all. I'm actually almost curious. We were debating the final bullpen spot.
But right? that's why I said why not? That's why I said why not let Marte make the roster and leave Gore off for now? Because Marte can be your pinch runner.
Steal you a run.
Yeah. I was going to add to that. Well, one, not only that, but 2, there's so much limitation with Marte, and the Mets have been very careful with him all year long too, with his base running. I mean, especially if you bring him in as a pinch runner, a guy that has not been actively in the game flow. God forbid if he hurts his hammy. I mean, that's it. So for me, I'm viewing that from a health perspective too. He's someone that has not been running 100% for a good portion of the year. He's been very strategic about when he's doing it because he knows a risk is there.
One of those things I never understood, the whole, like, I haven't done it for a while, so I might pull them. I guess pulling a muscle is something I fortunately didn't have to deal with much. I had a couple of little oblique things, but I never really did.
Oh my God. I've had
doing those squats all day, every day,
Yeah.
With the roster though, can you go 26-man roster? Can you go 12 pitchers, 14 hitters? Because that might be the smart thing to do. It's only a 3-game set for the wild card series.
I can't confirm nor deny that.
Yeah, I don't know what the roster configurations have to be. I would say if you can, absolutely. I mean, why would you need 13 pitchers for a 3-game set? Realistically,
right? You don't.
If you need all 13, then you did something wrong and you're losing the series.
If you got Max and Jake going and Bassett, who's eaten more innings than any of them, and you need 13 pitchers, I mean, you should be able to carry the bare minimum of pitchers, which I Bleav you can go 12 and 14. I don't think you can go past that. So maybe that's what they do. And then maybe Gore, Marte, Alvarez all make it, or Ruff if he's ready with his numbers against these guys. Who the hell knows what happens there? But yeah, I think carry the maximum amount of hitters and bench pieces you can because they just don't have defensive versatility.
Yeah. Now, in your guys' opinion, when you look at just lineup overall from a defensive standpoint, for me, I think it makes most sense to have McNeil in right, assuming that Marte obviously isn't ready, and having Guillorme at second. Do you guys agree or disagree with that?
I'll let you go first, Joe.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, look, I think defensively, McNeil's played a Gold Glove caliber second base this season, and so I hate to take him away from that spot. But at the same time, Guillorme is a Gold Glove caliber, whatever you put him at. And Naquin's a pretty good defensive right fielder, but he's also a guarantee. I feel like at this point, especially against better pitchers in the playoffs, guarantee minimum 2 strikeouts a game.
Who's going to give you a better at bat, right?
Guillorme is absolutely going to give you a better at bat, and McNeil plays hard and makes plays no matter where you stick him. So even though he's played a great second base, I'd rather have Guillorme's glove and bat out there than Naquin any night.
I mean, yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm gonna look something up real quick because I'm not exactly sure what the number is, but I do know that. Look, we've talked about this Mets team, and essentially their biggest problem is not hitting the long ball, right? Mm-hmm. Luis Guillorme is not going to hit you a long ball. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't be on the roster. It doesn't mean he shouldn't be in this lineup. But you've got guys who can string together at bats, who can put together at bats, that can put the ball in play, that can do all those things. In Tyler Naquin, you get a guy who does have some pop, a guy who can leave the yard. He didn't do it much this year. That's what I wanted to look up. He's had 4 in his 123 ABs so far. I don't know if that's this season or just with the Mets, but regardless, the guy has the ability to leave the yard. I talked about it. I know last year his numbers were totally different. He had a great year, at least at parts of the year. Hit a lot of home runs, decent amount of home runs. I've seen this guy play. He was a teammate of mine in I think it was the 2016 year in Cleveland. I started the year in AAA that year with them, and he was phenomenal. I mean, this kid could play, man. He had an arm. He could run. He could hit for power. He hit for average at the time. It was incredible watching him go out there and do it. Now, at the big league level, he does have a swing and miss type bat, and that's what has hurt him at the big league level. And the San Diego pitching staff can get you to swing and miss, particularly the three guys that they're going to throw out there for these 3 games as starters. So realistically, I get that, but I'd almost trade that opportunity of, Guillorme's good ABs versus Naquin potentially striking out if it means Naquin could pop one. Because realistically, that's the one thing that this lineup has been missing all year long. And that's probably what they need, honestly. Just that opportunity for him to, because he's going to be better out there in right field than McNeil. No doubt about it. Guillorme might be better at second base than McNeil, but McNeil's been so good. I still like him being out there. We saw, McNeil out and left in Oakland, that ball, that line drive that could hit over his head in that DeGrom start in Oakland. That was a ball that honestly he should have caught. He just bad read. It wasn't the easiest ball in the world. But what if something like that happens in the playoffs? Like, that's a totally different thing, totally different animal. I would just rather have guys in their position, playing the position they're supposed to play, because that's what I trust more than anything else. So to me, I guess I'm thinking about this as I'm going. Like, I'm honestly just bringing stuff up just so I can think about it. That's why I let you go first, Joe. But I really think I would go with Naquin in the outfield and McNeil at second base.
So if you're going to do that, what about Eddie at DH and Guillorme at third? You got the better glove at third, and you get Eddie at DH, the most proven hitter by far out of the DH options. Do you like that over?
He's been hot, obviously.
Maybe against Snell. I wouldn't do that against Darvish.
Okay.
Because then you're taking Vogelbach out of the lineup against Darvish, which I wouldn't do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that's your game 2 lineup. Maybe that's what you do game 2. I like that, actually. So that gives you, every reason to do that game. Game 1, Bogey's in there. You have your lineup. Maybe McNeil does go in right. Maybe he doesn't. Even if he doesn't, Escobar's at third, McNeil's at second, and Naquin's in right. And then for game 2, you do that. You throw Guillorme in at third base.
But then if you do that game 2, you're taking Bogey out of the lineup and DHing Escobar, but you're leaving Naquin in right. Now, actually, what I would do game 2 is I would actually kind of do what we each suggested, but just game 1, game 2. Game 1, Naquin in right, McNeil at second, leave Guillorme on the bench. Game 2 against the lefty, I would take Naquin out, put McNeil in right, Guillorme at second. Because I think McNeil against Snell, we all know Snell is a big strikeout walk guy, right? I think with Naquin, it's just not going to bode well. Guillorme can, I don't know what his splits are exactly against lefties in terms of getting hits, but I think Guillorme can run Snell's pitch count up much better than Naquin would be able to. So I would almost do a combination of those two. I'd feel bad for McNeil. He'd be at a different position, games 1, game 2. But if there's any guy who's a gamer who can do it and not give a shit, I think it's Jeff McNeil. Question is with DH, then do you have Vogie in there in the lineup game 2, or do you have an Alvarez? Do you have a Ruff? Do you have someone else DH? Can Marte DH? A lot of question marks, way more question marks than I'd like. And that's why, I was so hell-bent on winning this division, because you give the guys the extra time off, the extra rest. You know what the plan is game 1, against the winner of the Cardinals-Phillies series, should they have gotten the 2 seed. But there's a lot of question marks here. People are going to have to step up. Like I said earlier, the approach, and Rec, you've echoed this with your whole Naquin sentiment. The approach needs to be swing with a little bit of damn pop here. Put the ball out. Stop leaving guys on base. With the Braves, it was great. Sunday Night Baseball, we had first and second in the first inning. We had, left 2 guys on it. We had 4. It was either 4 left on base in the first 2 innings or 6 in the first 3 innings against the Braves. Even when they scored some runs, they left Eddie on third with no outs and couldn't get him in. So, stop leaving guys on base, damn it, and pop 1 or 2 out. Just
to your point there, not about the home runs, because I will say this about that. Trying to get guys to do something they haven't done all year is really hard to do. At this point in the season, you are who you are. If you try to make adjustments, it's going to take a little time. But beside that, I just quickly looked it up just so we know. Scherzer's ground ball rate, incredibly low this year, 32%. That is a very low ground ball rate. So to me, that's the day you have to have Naquin in the outfield, 100%. Because if you're going to have more fly balls, you're going to have more line drives out there, because the line drive rate was, I think, 30%. The fly ball rate was 31%. Line drive rate was lower than that. But to me, if you're going to have good balls, a lot of balls in the outfield, then you got to have your guys out there. Obviously, then Bassett, almost 50% ground ball rate. So that's your time to use Guillorme, like you were saying, in the infield. Put him at third, have him Neal at second base. Naquin's in the outfield again.
One thing that I did want to address real quick before we advance forward is a donation from Blind Beard, who's a great supporter. He says, member of Tuesday Children Rec, missed out on an opportunity to meet you. Thanks for all you guys did this season. Only need the one game this past weekend. Yeah, we did only need one game this past weekend, but Blind Beard was actually really kind. He went out of his way to find me and some other Mets personalities at a game, like, what was it, a month and a half ago? So it was awesome meeting you, brother. Thank you again for that donation. I appreciate it. But question I have for you guys before we get closer to wrapping up this discussion and then taking some comments from the live viewers is, when it comes to weather, for me, especially, you look at how much things have drastically changed here. Game 1 looks like it's going to be nice, high 75. It's going to probably be at lowest in the, 50s for the most part, because it's 8 o'clock start. So for Rec, in your opinion, as someone that experienced all different types of weather, especially, later into the season, what type of impact do you think?
City Field.
Yeah. What type of impact do you think that's going to have not only on the Mets hitters, but their pitchers and the opposing team in the Padres, who, again, I know that San Diego isn't, ridiculously hot, all year long, but they're coming from a warmer climate to this.
But
do you
it's
think that
always 75?
Exactly. Yeah. It's beautiful all year long. Do you think that there is going to be a factor from the weather coming into the series?
Yeah. Early in the season and late in the season at Citi Field, obviously it's cooler, but the wind also picks up too.
Yeah.
It's windier.
It was windy as all hell yesterday. Did you see how bad it was getting out the game?
Yes. And I can tell you the one thing at Citi Field that reigned true the 3 years I was there, and even when I haven't been, when I've been back to the stadium, the wind blows out at home plate, meaning toward the pitcher. So when they throw sinkers, sliders, whatever it is, the ball moves more. Bartolo was really good in New York for a reason. That sinker was nasty when he was at home, especially early and late. It was disgusting. So guys like Bassett with the big sinker, Taiwan when he uses the comebacker, like Scherzer, dude, he knows how to use movement. If these guys go to some of those pitches, I promise you, if they're going to be moving, it's going to be really tough to hit. So that's one way it can affect, obviously what happens. Another thing, of course, is the fact that these San Diego Padres probably aren't as used to playing in cold weather. I will say, that gets a little bit overblown because realistically, as a hitter, unless it's like 10 degrees, I'm not really worried about my hands getting blown up or something silly like that. Really, it affects me more out in the field when I just can't grip the baseball if it's too cold. But otherwise, it's not really affecting me that much at the plate. But I will tell you, and this is something that as Citi Field being their home field, the Mets should be able to take advantage of this. Like, this is something that's well known. I've known this since I played, since my first year. I was like, man, this is crazy how much different the weather makes the game here at Citi Field. And I've stressed that to, when I remember speaking to Billy Epler this past offseason, I was talking to him about all kinds of things. That was one of the things I brought up to him was that, it's different. It's Citi Field, the way that it plays, it's tough because it blows out at the pitcher on home plate. But then you get to the outfield, it's knocking balls down. It's the weirdest place to play. It's as a hitter, it's awful. I can tell you it's an awful place to play when it's cold and windy because the ball just literally goes nowhere. So that's going to affect this series a lot.
That Flushing Bay breeze is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I remember in the playoffs when I was working there in 2015, the Cubs series, it was dipping down. Dodgers series wasn't that bad, but man, when the Cubs were in town for the NLCS for those 2 games, it was dipping down into like the upper 20s. I think it was like 27, 28 at the end of the night it got down to. And, the wind there is just, especially, I mean, I know as a player, if you're a fan up on that promenade level, and maybe you saved up to go to this game and you haven't been to Citi Field in a long time, or you haven't been there in April or October, layer the hell up. I'm talking like 4 or 5 layers if you're going to be sitting up in the 400s or 500s.
Thankfully, I'm in section 129 on Friday, so I think I'll be okay.
Oh, all right. Well,
just a denim jacket.
I got some tickets donated to me.
Yeah, he just
no brother's birthday gift. Get it right. There you go.
There you go. Hey, speaking of donos, didn't we get one more?
Yeah.
Oh, I just read that one. That's
okay. So you guys can read off as you want right now, but for those that don't know, 1200 is a great member on the channel, and something that he's done is reference Thomas Szapucki, since Szapucki absolutely got shelled in San Francisco months ago, and I want to say it was like June, right? And of course now he's a San Francisco Giant, so he always loves to just throw his name in there in any time that he discusses. But you see the dono there. As you can tell, himself and many other Mets fans are not in most love with Tyler Naquin and Darren Ruff at the plate. No less, I do appreciate the donation a lot, my friend. Thank you so much for that.
By the way, there was another comment, I think from a guy named Charles, I wanted to address a few minutes ago. Yeah, there it is. Because he said that Rec used to have a John Cena-like body. And so to Charles, I just want to say used to.
Yeah.
What the hell do you mean used to? It hasn't gone anywhere, Charles. What the hell are you talking about?
Little do you know.
Okay. I was doing a little something earlier today.
Yeah, you guys missed it. I should have started the stream 5 minutes before we did.
What was today? Arm day, Rec? Was it arm day?
No, I don't do arm days. That's something that's from the past.
Yeah, he's just naturally swole.
You do that. No, you do that. You do the things you're supposed to do to actually strengthen your joints, your muscles, everything else, and the arms take care of themselves. Little lesson for you guys out there. Anybody who's listening,
there you go.
You don't have to do beach day. Promise.
Before I address the next donation, I want to mention too, I think about 2015 for the Mets and that run and just how cold it got, obviously, late into October into the World Series. And one thing that I noticed, at least as a fan, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rec, one player that really did cool down in postseason, whether it was just because of the weather or it was because of pressure, just unfortunately not hitting the way that the Mets need him to, was their star Yoenis Cespedes. So when I look at Cespedes' production or lack thereof in, of course, postseason, it makes me think of the big hitters for the Mets now coming up, again, facing harsher climates. And Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, how are these guys going to adjust? So in your opinion, do you think that they're going to have a tall task should the Mets go on a deep run here past just this weekend? Or do you think it's going to be, like anything else?
Polar bear, man. Polar bears don't get cold.
Yeah, that's true. He's going to be fine.
Could you honestly see Pete with all those layers he's got getting cold and not being able to swing it? No, he's going to be just fine. When I think about Francisco, look, he made a deep run with Cleveland. Obviously,
I always think about that too.
Lost him. He knows what it's like, and Cleveland is way worse than I promise you. That place is cold come late October, November. So no, I don't foresee it being any problem. Like I said, the only issue I see is occasionally defensively. But these guys, they're pros for a reason. They've got a way to put a little bit of sticky something. I know people don't want to hear that, but you put a little sticky something somewhere in between pitches, like, okay, I'm ready to go. I got my fingers tacked up. Let's, I feel this ground ball and throw it first. And just on that subject real quick, you need a little something sometimes because that thing is like a cue ball when it gets cold out.
Oh my! It probably hurts like a mofo.
So hard to throw the baseball,
especially as a catcher. I can only imagine what that's like, especially when you're taking 90+ heaters in the freezing cold. I mean that doesn't sound fun.
Foul tips, you're saying?
No, just in general, just taking your pitches. I'm sure that it puts more wear and tear on your hand than it does, obviously, in a nice warm climate. Let's see here. We got a donation from Sean that says, "Let's go
Cleveland in the playoffs." By the way, is I drove out there when I was in college because I was at St. Bonaventure. Cleveland was like the closest major city. It was about 3 hours away. Drove there for Game 5 of the ALDS with a buddy who's another diehard Met fan. We went because it was Indians at the time against the Yankees. And I bought a Lindor shirt back when he was with Cleveland. We went just to root against the Yankees. And we sat in the very top row behind home plate. We had Cleveland shirts on and Mets hats on. And we were just heckling the Yanks the whole game. CeCe carved them up like a hot knife through butter. And the Yanks ended up winning that one. But it was, especially top row of the stadium, it was brutal in Cleveland in October. So, with Lindor, and it was a good point, Tyler, sometimes I do worry about, how Latino players are going to handle October weather in New York. Cespedes playing in Cuba his whole life. Lindor is also, he's a vet who's been around enough, had enough years in Cleveland.
And he had a run early in his career too.
He's probably accustomed to it by now. But I do think it is a valid question, guys, whether it was, Latin America, whether it was, Vogie and Pete and Nito growing up in Florida, guys who are from warmer climates, how they handle October baseball. I think it definitely is a valid question.
Before we get to the donation about Hartwig, because that's separate from the discussion, it's a Mets minor leaguer, in case you guys, especially Joe, I don't know if you have a good background on Grant. He's a really interesting reliever for the Mets. Well, I shouldn't even say reliever. I don't know what he would pan out to be at the MLB level. But before I do, I want to ask you guys, in your opinion, from an offensive standpoint, aside from Juan Soto, or maybe not even Juan Soto, what are you looking for from the Padres? Like, what should Mets us fans and, just following the team be most concerned with when facing up against these Padres from an offensive perspective, because they got the top dogs in Soto, Machado. Then you have the Cronenworths of the world, who again has had an up and down season. You get Ha-Seong Kim, who has had some nice stretches this year. They have a lot of pieces there, but they have went through plenty of slumps throughout the year. So starting with you, Rec, what do you think the Mets need to do best game plan wise in approaching and attacking this Padres offense?
Well, it's going to be interesting, and I think what you're going to have to see is, what the Padres' game plan is coming into these games. You're going to have to kind of feel it out. If you're Max Scherzer, if you're Chris Bassett, if you're Jacob deGrom, specifically if you're Scherzer or deGrom, you're going in with what works for you, right? That's typically where these go. You can look at what guys' weaknesses are. But when you look at the top of this Padres lineup, and realistically the whole thing, I mean, this is a good Padres lineup, and the potential is there top to bottom to do damage, to hit the ball out of the ballpark, to spray the ball around, to take walks, everything. Realistically, you just have to go in with your best and make sure that whatever you see from them, you're willing to make adjustments with right away. I'm not going to be pitching around Juan Soto. I'm not going to be really pitching around anyone, specifically because, like I said, this whole lineup can hurt you. I know there's been guys who are hot and cold here and there, and at times Cronenworth's been better of late. Soto, he's pretty much been the same guy all year. For whatever reason, that average has never really gotten up there, but he still takes a ton of walks. Power numbers are, okay, not great. But Machado's been the guy who's been, pretty good for them for the most part all year. I'm not going to go out of my way to treat anyone like they're Aaron Judge this year. But I'm also going to make sure that I'm just trying to execute my game plan. What do I do well? Start with that and make adjustments from there. I'm sure they're going to have more in-depth kind of game plans than that as the series opens up. But realistically, when you look at this team, this Padres lineup, they have as much potential to do damage as any other lineup in all of baseball. That's the kind of talent that's on this roster. Whether they've put it together or not doesn't really matter, because when you talk about the way they put together game plans, the way this front office and all front offices for the most part, they don't go on those small sample sizes. They're not going to say, oh, in the last 2 weeks he hasn't been hitting. They won't say that because they're not silly enough to think, okay, well, he hasn't hit for the last 2 weeks, so there's no way he's going to hit for these next 3 days. That's not how baseball works. It can turn on a dime. Everything can change. You can be a completely different hitter. So you have to take it over a bigger sample size. And realistically, that's like a 3-year timestamp. And when you do that, you have a really good lineup when you look at this Padres team. And that's just something that, like I said, this Mets staff has to stick to what they do best and go from there.
What about you, Joe?
I want to see one alteration from this pitching staff approaching the Padres lineup. And Rec, you said it earlier, it's tough to change things when you've been doing things a certain way all year. But I want to see them pitch inside a little more. They haven't pitched inside. And I know, and I think, Rec, you might have said this last episode, the analytics say you get more outs when you pitch guys away. And I'm sorry, I don't give a shit about what the analytics say here, because, Rec, you've been playing baseball, over 30 years? I mean, when you got to the point where guys started throwing a little hard, they brushed a guy off. All of a sudden, didn't it set up that outside pitch for a lot more success?
100%. That's exactly why you get. That's what, when we were talking about that, it was you get your outs away, but you still got to set it up. You still got to go in. You still got to show guys that you're willing to go in. One of the problems with deGrom that I've noticed is that, and they were talking about it his last start on the broadcast, but realistically, if you look at his hot zones where he throws pitches, it's 3 spots. He throws his fastball middle up. He throws his slider down and into lefties, down and away to righties, same spot. He throws his changeup kind of middle-ish down to kind of almost in to righties, away to lefties. Like that's the only spots he throws his pitches. I mean, obviously he mixes it up here and there a little, but for the most part, he is very consistent with what he does with his pitches. When you don't go in, when you don't establish in, and guys at the big league level, no matter how good you are, can start to think, okay, I'm going to sit fastball. Not only am I going to sit fastball, I'm going to sit for this thing middle up. I'm going to look for one middle up, and I'm going to make sure I have that flat bat plane to try to get on time with it and hit this thing hard somewhere, because it's coming in at 100. All I got to do is touch it. I don't even have to swing hard. I just got to make contact with the barrel. This thing's going to go. And so that becomes a whole new problem. So I agree with you. From a pitching standpoint, you have to at least establish that you're willing to go in. Does it have to be for a strike? No.
No.
Does it have to be all the time? No. Do you have to show it to some of these guys? Absolutely. Don't be afraid to. I mean, look, you don't want to hit people in this situation because it's a 3-game series, but you got to be able to go in there. And if you've gotten to the big leagues and you haven't learned how to go inside, then someone didn't coach you right coming up through the minor leagues. I can promise you that was something that coming up through the minor leagues we harped on in Oakland. It was, you have to be able to pitch in no matter what. You got to learn to do it because at some point in the big leagues, you're going to have to go inside.
And when you have a slider like Jake and Max do, to not throw your fastball inside, especially to a righty, and then go down and away, it should be criminal. It should absolutely be criminal. I mean, and this is my thing. It's like sometimes I don't know if it's ego. I don't know if it's being a perfectionist. But sometimes I worry, especially with those two guys, that they've been so hell-bent. And I don't know if it's coming from themselves or the coaching staff, but I feel like this team has been so hell-bent on throwing strikes this year and not walking people that, I'm sorry, you don't want to give a free pass. But if you hit a guy, you know what? Next time he steps in the box, Juan Soto likes to crowd that dish. He's not going to be so damn comfortable the next time he steps in the box if you hit one. I'm not saying do it on purpose, but I'm saying brush his ass back. And it's nothing against Juan Soto. I love Juan Soto. I was screaming every.
Let him do that little freaking whatever he does. It doesn't matter. Just let him do it.
I love Juan Soto. I love the way he plays the game.
Yeah.
It's nothing against him, but he's a superstar and he crowds the plate. Brush him back. I wanted them to do it to Swanson. I wanted them to do it to Olsen. Both of them at 3 homers apiece. Didn't do it once. So I'm saying pitch inside, establish what Noah Syndergaard established. Whatever you think about him now, folks out there, fans out there watching the broadcast, he was the only guy who got a win in the 2015 World Series. And on that first pitch after Escobar, Alcides Escobar was crowding the plate. He was cocky, hit that inside the Parker off Harvey game 1. Syndergaard threw it up and in, got him off his feet, and established that it was his pitcher's mound, that it was his field. I mean, Scherzer and DeGrom have it in them. It's somewhere in them. I just want to see it come out of them, not just against the Padres, but against whoever else the Mets play this postseason. Be the freaking alpha. Not to sound like childish, but, be the alpha out there. Establish it's your mound, it's your field. Throw inside. It sets up the rest of your pitches, and it gets these guys, they're getting too comfortable. We've been hit more than any other team in baseball this year. We set the record in the modern era, and yet we're letting these other guys dig in and get comfortable, most notably freaking Swanson. And it's like, just throw the damn ball in.
You took all the words out of my mouth. I was about to address exactly what you're saying, especially the part where the Mets have, again, been hit more than any other team in MLB's history. It makes endless sense why the Mets, at minimum, if you're not going to retaliate by drilling guys, at least, again, set the standard by pitching in. And they're not even doing that. And that's something where you look at the Mets game plan, not that we want to harp much more on that Braves series, but it's noted given, again, the severity of it. It was a playoff atmosphere. And the Mets rotation, for the most part, did not get the job done. They did not have a strong game plan. So now, how are they going to be able to adjust and make sure that they don't make those same simple mistakes? Because even if Jake comes out and hopefully, we need to see these guys get deep. That's the biggest concern for me. Again, Jake, can he give you 7 innings without having the pitch count get absolutely ridiculous? Max, can you get 7 innings from him? Bassett, can you get 7 innings? But more than anything, it's Jake, Max, these guys, when they're making those 1, 2, 3 mistakes, when you're facing a playoff team like the Braves, or in this instance going to be the Padres now, they're going to always make you pay. And having those same exact mistakes very well can be the factors in winning or losing these ball games over the weekend. So it may not seem like it's much, but just a couple swings and you're out of it. We know how the Mets have faced early deficits, for example. That's another thing that I'm looking for. I was asked a great question by a live caller in my show yesterday, and it was exactly, what's my viewpoint on Buck heading into postseason? And aside from how he will manage the bullpen, which has been really the only big gripe that he's had as a manager over the past couple of decades, it's how is he going to keep the Mets locked in here if they face an early deficit? Because this is something that we've seen for a while now, pretty much the entire second half for a majority of the games. Not every game, because we've seen what they did against the Phillies. We've seen what they did against Milwaukee, in Milwaukee, rather. We saw what they did with Eduardo Escobar putting the team on his back. But there's been endless instances that we've seen for a while now where when the Mets are facing early deficits and they're not themselves getting down in front within those first couple innings, they just have not been able to reach that comeback that you're looking for. So, Rex, starting with you, do you think that this is something that, again, is still a concern transitioning in postseason? Or do you think Buck is going to be able to keep these guys level-headed, that no matter what you're looking at throughout the game, that they're going to be able to come together as a group and handle that pressure as they should?
I think when you talk about this team, I'm not going to give all the credit to Buck or all the credit to Eric Chavez, but I think they've been as good and as strong mentally as any team in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
And the reason I can say that is because how many times have they lost more than 3 games in a row?
None.
Once. The entire season. So that takes a level of intensity, mental fortitude, strength, the ability to go out there and perform day in and day out. This coaching staff does not need to motivate them. They do not need to get them going if they fall behind. They don't need to, try to figure out a way to wake up the bats. Realistically, this team knows how to do that. Does it always happen that way? No. And that's just part of baseball. That's part of being a team that doesn't hit the ball out of the ballpark. That's part of being a team that has to string together ABs when you might have a couple of guys that are cold and all of a sudden they're automatic outs in your lineup. You're not going to string together at bats. You're not going to string together runs. It's just not going to happen for you. So realistically, if this is who you are, you're going to have to find ways to manufacture runs or try to get on base or do what you got to do. And I trust them if they do fall behind. They're not hanging their heads. They're just might be struggling. And that's okay. That's part of baseball. That's just what happens.
What about you, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, not going to go against anything that Rec just said. It's, when you talk about Buck and the way he's led this team, he's not the manager that's going to go into the locker room and start throwing chairs. And trust me, there have been times, not many, but there have been a couple times this season where I wanted to go in the locker room and start throwing chairs, right? He's not going to go in there and do that and try to, get these guys to respond that way. But that also comes with the fact that not only is Buck a seasoned vet, not only is Chavez cool, calm, and collected and as knowledgeable a hitter as there, has been in the past couple decades in this league, but the team is also the oldest team in baseball. The team is, not going to get too high and not going to get too low. And there's something to be said for that. And I think at the end of the day, whatever happens. I don't love the position they're in, being in the 4th spot. I've said it several times. I don't need to say it anymore. But whatever happens. These guys are, they're going to do things their way. They've been really successful, the second most successful team in the 60 years of this franchise's regular season history. And, whatever works for them is what's going to happen. But, yeah, I mean, I trust Buck fully. I trust the coaching staff fully. It's just, I want guys, when I talk about the pitching, right? I don't even expect that to come from Hefner. I expect vets like Scherzer and Jake and Bassett, and they're all vets. Ty, Cookie, right? I expect them to find that within themselves, to do what Syndergaard went out there and did. And I don't know if Syndergaard, Rec, I don't know if you know this, if that was orders from the coaching staff, if Terry Collins said, hey, go, put Escobar on his ass first pitch, or if Noah just went and did it himself. But
well, a lot of that was because Escobar was swinging first pitch, and he was coming out and not afraid to go after the first pitch. And I don't know where that order came from, but I can tell you that that's something that Noah would have wanted. He would have wanted to be the guy to do that. Obviously, just like he was the guy who came out and threw at Chase Utley. He wanted to be that guy that's his mound. He's going to have that presence, and he's going to show you that he is the authoritarian that day. And realistically, that's just who he was. And yeah, you would expect guys like Scherzer, DeGrom. So honestly, I think more than anyone, Bassett, actually, this guy has some attitude when he's out there, and I love that about him. He might be the one, and look, this is something that we talk about a lot of things as players. From a hitting perspective, we'll sit down at the table before a game, after a game, we're eating our meals, whenever it is, we're on the airplane, and we start talking about the game. We start talking about things that happen. We start talking about pitchers. Mid-game, we're on the bench. We're talking about what's going on. That's stuff that comes up, like you're talking about your approach or how you're going to face a certain guy. Or, hey, look, as a team, we got to go in on some guys. We got to start doing this. And that's something that happens all the time among the players, not something that has to ever and should ever have to come from a coach or a manager.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I brought it up, because Noah, he was a kid at the time. He was 23, 24 years old in that World Series. So for him, maybe it came from TC, maybe. But a guy like Max, who's probably, is Max older than his pitching coach? Is he older than Hefner?
Yes.
It's a good question.
No, he is.
I'm pretty sure. Hefner was pitching, I want to say, in 11, 12.
2013.
Yeah, one of the first things Max said this year in the interview.
Fantasy football league, by the way?
He is not in the fantasy football league. No.
Top secret
one of the first things that Max said in an interview when signing with the Mets and, talking about Hefner was that, he's been doing a really good job. He said it is a little weird, knowing that I'm older than the pitching coach, but yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, and look, I love Hefner. I was stoked when they brought him aboard. No disrespect to him. Max has probably forgotten more about pitching than Hefner knows. I mean, it's just, Max is a very cerebral guy. He doesn't just go out there and let his arm do the work. Max is, he's everything you want in a pitcher. He's a savvy vet. He knows he doesn't have Jake's stuff, but he's got toughness. He's got location. He knows what the hell he's doing out there. That should be coming from him. And don't forget Darvish. I'm pretty sure he's the guy in San Diego who put Pete and Marte, knocked them both out of the game with some early hit by pitches. So I'm not retaliation. My objective here is win the damn game, not be petty, not get back at anyone.
Yep, exactly.
Throw into Soto, throw into Machado, establish what Noah established in 15, and don't just do it this weekend against the Padres. Do it however long you're in this damn thing for October and hopefully November. Because I think just opposing teams, guys are getting too comfortable. They're digging in. I think it's part of the reason that the Mets have only won 11 of their last 21, started by Max and Jake. And
it's beautiful too. Hopefully the Mets can, again, do exactly what we're hoping for here. Because if they do start to pitch in, especially, no better time to do it than now. I mean, talk about throwing the hitters off guard. If you look at the Mets throughout the regular season, this is something that they haven't done often from their aces. So if they come out here guns a-blazing saying that, yeah, we're going to brush you off a lot, it may take some hitters by surprise. So that's another factor that, again, can go in the Mets' favor should they go with this potential game plan here. But, before we do a quick Q&A to wrap up the show, I did want to address, there was one donation. This is from Elliot, a phenomenal supporter on the channel since day one. He says, Rec, I'm a big fan. In your opinion, what would be the best lineup for the wildcard games? Now, we briefly discussed this already. So, Rec, why don't you just tell Elliot, in your opinion, what do you think is the best lineup for the New York Mets?
Yeah, well, look, let's do it this way. Let's go because you got to break it up. It's each game is going to be totally different. But realistically, let's just go game one because that's where we're starting off at. So we got you on the mound. For me, I'm going to go by position here, and then I can actually, I'll try to do it by the lineup, and then we can. I'll tell you what position they're playing. Sure. So Nimmo's leading off. He's in center field. That's easy. We're assuming Marte is not going to be available, certainly to play right field and swing a bat. So to me, the 2 spot goes to Francisco Lindor. You have him at 2 playing short. I'm sorry. Yeah. Him at 2 playing short. Then I'm going to go Pete at first base, hitting third. Then I'm going to move McNeil I like McNeil in the 4 hole behind him. So I'm going to put McNeil behind him, hitting fourth, playing second base. Then I'm going to put, who would it be? I guess
Vogie, Escobar, Kana.
Yeah. I think honestly, just the way that he's been swinging the bat and the fact that he's switch hit, I think I would go with Escobar hitting 5th right now, and throw him obviously at third base. Then I'm going to put Vogie in there, 6th, DH. 7's going to be, I'm trying to think of where I'm missing guys. Canna, absolutely. Canna hitting 7th. And I really like Canna towards the bottom of this lineup just because of the way it kind of lengthens things, the way he gets on base and kind of sets things up again. And then where else am I missing here? Oh, Naquin would be out and right. He'd be batting 8th. And then I'm going to have Nito in there catching all 3 of these games. That's just, to me, that's common sense. He's at the hotter bat. I don't care
for the Mets to do that, even if they go 3 games. Do you think that they'll go Nito back to back to back?
I think they should. I think if they don't, they're he's better defensively. His framing numbers are better. He's got a better arm. He handles the staff really well. He's known these guys for years. From a pitch calling standpoint, I've actually enjoyed watching him back there more so than McCann. And realistically, like I said, offensively, he's been better of late. So I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be back there all 3.
Agreed, 100%.
Rick, can I ask you a question?
Yep.
I'm going to go use the restroom real quick, folks. I'll be right back. I'm going to pee right on
Look at this schmuck. He's got the bladder of an 80-year-old man.
Live TV. You think I get to do that when I'm on TV? No. You think that's how it works?
You're telling me that when they do a close-up on Yonder Alonso,
you should just do it while your MLB Tonight's be like mid-sentence, be like, 5 minutes. Be right back.
Hey, you know what, guys? I need a break. Pee break. That's why you carry big things like this, just in case,
Yeah, exactly.
Drop it out. You drink it and you put it back in. It makes sense. All right, be right back.
Can't do a water bottle. I got to keep the Gatorade bottle. It's got the bigger opening. But so, Rick, my question for you about the lineup construction is obviously, look, in an ideal world, Marte's back. He's hitting 2nd. But I'm thinking about flip-flopping. McNeil, he can hit anywhere you put him, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what you think about dropping Lindor down to maybe 5, because he's been an RBI machine this year. Okay. And maybe going McNeil 3 in that 3 spot, Pete 4, hit him cleanup, Lindor 5. Now, obviously, it's easier said than done, especially when Marte is healthy, because you can just put him in the 2 hole. Now it's a little tougher because if you drop Lindor from 2 to 5, who the hell's hitting second? But what do you think about Canna hitting second? Let him get some.
I knew you were going to go to that name. Because that's the one that makes the most sense. He's an on-base machine, just like Nimmo is. He's a guy who can take a walk. He's a guy who can hit a home run. He puts together great ABs. So I think it's something to consider. I don't know what his track record is, though, against Darvish, or if he has one at all. That would be the first thing I would go to. If he's got a good track record against Darvish, I'm fine with that. But the problem is, and the way I see this, this is a quick 3-game set, and I don't always do things this way, but with this set being 3 games in a row, every game is going to be more meaningful than any other series, like a 7-game series. At least you've got time, you can make adjustments. You lose one, not a huge deal. In this case, it is, and I want all of my best bats getting every AB. And that includes Lindor. I understand about the RBI scenarios, but realistically, I'm going to count on Nimmo to get on base every time he's up there. And obviously he's not going to. So if anything, maybe you slide Naquin and Nito up a slot and put Canna 9. That way it at least flips the lineup a little bit better.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just one way you can look at it, and that might give you that extra guy on base in front of Lindor in later at-bats throughout the course of the game, and more meaningful at-bats. So he still gets the same number of ABs, but you still have guys that are getting on base in front of him, outside of that first at-bat where it would just be Nimmo. So I think that's a way you can look at it, and that's a way that I love. When people talk about the 9 hole as the second leadoff, that's why they say that. It's because of the way it flips the lineup. And realistically, that's why some of those, managers went, okay, let's bat my pitcher 8th and put an actual guy hitting 9th. Because there is some, way that makes sense. It depends on who your leadoff hitter is. It depends on who your 2-hole hitter is. And in this case, both Nimmo and Lindor, I actually trust them both to put together great ABs all the time and to potentially drive in runs. So realistically, that's something that could absolutely work for this team.
And Nimmo, even though the stats might not show it because he is the leadoff hitter, is actually an RBI machine.
Yes.
It's just a matter of putting guys on base in front
of him. Last year, I was screaming to put him in a more meaningful position. Right? Yeah. I was getting tired of him being the only one who came up with hits with runners.
Yeah, he was the only one.
And he was still leading off.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I was more of the, Nimmo 1, Canna 2. But even if you put Canna in the 9 spot, I love them back-to-back. Last reason I love them back-to-back is they see more pitches than anyone else in this lineup. I think Guillorme's up there as well, but he's not obviously a mainstay everyday starter. But among the starters, Canna and Nimmo see more pitches per AB than anyone. So these are 2 guys that can easily take a pitcher for 10 to 15 pitches in a 2-batter span anytime they're up back-to-back throughout the course of the game.
The Mets have so many leadoff hitters, especially that's why it sucks not having Marte right now.
You just seamlessly come back from peeing and, jump right into the conversation.
What else am I supposed to do?
You see the way he came into it? He was like...
Professional here, Rec. Yeah.
Hold on, guys. Let me get in here. Let me get my face here.
Margo, please. There you go. No, Marte, I mean, think about him. He's a guy that can be going leadoff any day of the week. McNeil, he's had his spurts of being in leadoff when needed. Not now, especially he's been more in the latter half of the order. But Nimmo, Canna, I mean, even Guillorme to a lesser extent. The Mets have at least half their lineup that could all be, leadoff guys any and every day of the week. And that's what I loved about them because, again, they've been on-base kings. This year alone, if you look at them, I'm pretty sure they're 3, 4, and 5 in Nimmo, Canna, and I'm blanking. Is it? Hold on.
Is it Guillorme? You're talking like pitches per AB?
No, not pitches per AB. I'm just talking strictly like on base because I think the Mets have 3 guys in the top 5 or top 6.
He's
McNeil. Yep. Thank you. McNeil, Canna, and Nimmo.
Batting average alone, he's got to have that OBP up there.
Yeah, exactly. So that they have a lot of weapons for sure. We do have a donation here from Mike. He says, Anthony, please come back to the Mets. Miss your power. I wholeheartedly agree, Mike. Thank you so much for the donation. He's been a great supporter.
I like his name, Mike Lifts.
Mike Lifts, exactly.
Get it in, Mike. Get it in. Yeah.
All right, guys. Before we start to just answer some questions here from the chat, any final remarks, any final takeaways about this series for the Mets between themselves and the Padres?
I think in 88 minutes, we've hit it all. And I think that's the 4th time you've said before we answer some questions. So why don't we answer
only the 4th?
Maybe 5 or 6. We might be on a half dozen guys before we answer some questions.
The only thing to say is go do it. Like, go do it. This is your time. You got here, and this is what, as a player, it's not about, yes, you want to win the division. Yes, it's great. Love it. Let's win the division. Let's get a bye. Let's, have that banner to raise. It's about winning the World Series. You got yourself in a position. You got into the playoffs. Now's the time. It doesn't matter that you're the wild card team. I don't care that you have this extra set of 3 games and you're going to end up facing the Dodgers early and you're going to end up potentially facing the Braves late, in the next round. It doesn't matter. This is your chance. Go out and do it. And that's my only message for this team, for this fan base. Like, just enjoy this, because this team does have the ability to pull off some things that in the last week have suddenly become, I don't want to say unattainable, but people have made it seem like it's impossible for them to advance in the playoffs, and it's not. And, I've said it before. I don't think they're the World Series favorites. I didn't think that in the beginning of the year. I still don't think that, but they're a very good baseball team. Get hot, you can win it all.
Yeah, the Braves weren't the World Series favorites going into it last year. Now they're the top dog. They didn't even have 90 wins last year in the regular season.
Nope.
Now they're the top dog in all of baseball. So, I mean, I love it. That little speech got me ready to go grab my glove.
I got you guys.
I'm ready. I'm ready. And I love the graphic. Tyler had that Q&A time graphic.
There you go. We're all set.
I feel like I'm watching Blue's Clues. Mail time.
Wow. Actually, you know what?
I grew up watching Blue's Clues.
I feel like you could be the next host of Blue's
no.
Oh, he's got.
Like, isn't Joe?
I
Joe's one of the hosts.
Middle school.
Yeah.
I live too close to a middle school to be that guy.
See what you're going there. Now leave that go.
I'm getting chills just thinking about Friday, not only because of the weather, but also
I
because
thought you were talking about like middle school kids. I was going to say, oh, no.
No, Jesus Christ.
Well, Tyler can get away with it. He looks like one of them.
He is. True. How old are you, Tyler? I mean, come on.
Just shave the beard. If I just shave the beard, I can easily get away with it. Honestly, I don't even know if I would need to. There's middle schoolers with like full beards nowadays. Those GMOs are kicking in big time. I mean, let's be honest here.
I think I had my beard senior year of high school.
Okay.
I still don't have a beard. I still can't grow one.
You'll catch up one day, Rick.
It's awful.
It won't grow into your liking?
I'm okay with it. I don't like having a shave. It's the worst thing in the world. Waste my time.
All
Shave
right.
the hair off my face. Q&A time. Let's go.
Let's do it.
Charles
Q&A
says Tyler
time.
looks like a middle school English teacher.
Who says that?
Charles in the chat.
Or, I mean, who looks like that? You? Middle school English
Rick,
teacher?
this is what I need to ask you. So many people have said this to me, and I don't see it nearly as much as them. Endless people, every single time I do shows or on Twitter, they always say I look like Michael Conforto. I don't really see it, but they do for whatever reason. Do you see it? Because I don't see it.
I don't see it. No. I mean, I know Michael Conforto well enough not to diss on him that much. So.
Woo!
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
He was my favorite player on the Mets too. Again.
You know, it's funny. In 15, when I was working for the Mets, people actually used to come up and say that to me in the rotunda when I was working there, and I never saw that one either.
I guess it's easy to look like Michael. I don't know what else to say.
I never saw that one.
What are you, like 6'5", 150 pounds, Joe? Like
literally. It's
6'4",
literally
180. Come on, 6'4", 180.
Same thing.
He was like Slenderman walking up to me. He had to give me a big hug. It was nice.
That was fun. I had to bend down lower to give you a hug than I do half the girls I go on dates with.
Oh, man.
All right. Here's a question from Richard. It says, do we win the division if we never trade Rosario and Jimenez for Lindor?
Wow. Coming in hot, Richard. Look, this is actually a fun one for me. I've thought about this one, but I wasn't a huge Rosario fan when he was here. He swung the bat a lot.
No walks.
Didn't take his walks. It just never really developed for him, and I don't think he would have developed here. What he's become in Cleveland, it's not drastically better than what he was here in New York, but it is better, and I don't think that would have happened if he was still here. Jimenez, I saw this coming. I love this kid from his first at-bat. I saw him put it together. The power, I didn't know that was going to come the way that it has, but it doesn't totally shock me either because he was so young when he came up. I'm not going to say that they win the division with those two rather than Lindor, because Francisco Lindor is a fantastic player in his own right. And everything that he's done in New York, I know people wanted to see some bigger numbers at times, but he's been very, very good outside of pretty much his first 3 months. And realistically, I'm not going to take that away from him and what he's meant to this team from a leadership perspective, particularly this year. I think last year he tried to do too much from a leadership perspective. This year he's been more himself. So look, I'm not going to diss on Lindor like that because like I said, I know him. I was in Cleveland with him in 2016, and I love him too much to do that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if there's the definition of a win-win trade, it was that trade. I mean, I think it worked out beautifully for Cleveland, a team that was picked, for third by some fourth place. Remember, guys were high on Detroit coming into this season, and the Tigers have done nothing. I think they're over.
I mean, I was high on the White Sox, but Detroit, why?
I think they're over on wins with 78.5 in Vegas coming into the year.
Terrible.
It was. They were the most hyped up disappointment this year. 100%.
Yeah, one of the guys on MLB Network, Rick, one of your coworkers, we should send him a schmuck shirt. I don't remember which one it was, but had Detroit.
You let me know who it is. I'll bring a schmuck shirt to him because I don't know who that was.
One of them had Detroit in the playoffs, and I'm going to look that up. I remember watching that in March. Yeah.
Javi Baez.
Yeah, right. Hitting 202. So yeah, Cleveland was projected for nothing, and I think that also kind of helps. Maybe not Jimenez, but Rosario. I think a guy like Ahmed Rosario, being on a team like Cleveland, in Cleveland, that market as opposed to New York, being projected for nothing, I think enabled him to have a great year. And I'm happy for him. I'm happy for Jimenez. I'm happy for the Guardians. But I'll take Lindor with his 100+ RBI. And also, if you have both Rosario and Jimenez, like where are they playing? One of them can play shortstop if we don't make that trade. Where's the other one playing? We got McNeil at second base, just won the batting title. I just don't know the dynamic, how that would work. I mean, I think, I don't think.
Well, I think realistically, they don't have to both play, right? You stick Jimenez somewhere at short, obviously. You stick Jimenez at short, and then Rosario could be your utility infielder, maybe fifth outfielder. They're obviously hurting for some outfield depth. He's not good out there. I know.
So how would that have benefited the team any more than Lindor?
Yeah. No, I think realistically what it comes down to for me is just Jimenez for Lindor. And that comes into a whole different perspective of money and from a GM perspective of trying to put together a team and having a lot more money to do it because Jimenez is drastically cheaper. That's great. But you're talking about this year and winning the division, and that's a different topic.
Yeah, exactly.
So I may or may not have had a phone call earlier today with my brother that was playing asked this exact question, and he did. So that's exactly what just happened.
Oh, Ward! I didn't even put that together.
There you go.
Dick
Yeah,
Ward.
he always brings up Rosario. That's just his thing. He has to do it. Elliot with the dono, he says, if the Mets win wild card games, who will be MVP to all three? Not sure what you mean by this exactly, Elliot. Do you just mean like in general, like who's going to be the biggest standouts?
Series MVP?
Yeah, who would be series MVP if the Mets win, 2 or 3 games? What do you guys think?
Is there a series MVP for the wild card now? Or are we doing this? Is this a thing?
There isn't, but for Elliot, there is.
Okay, I see. So who would be the Mets MVP in that scenario?
Correct.
We did this before the Brewers series, right?
Yeah.
What's that?
We did that on the show before the Brewers series, right? Like if they're going to go to Milwaukee and win, like who's going to be the guy?
Who's going to be the guy? Yeah. I'm going to say in this series it's going to be Edwin Diaz because I think you're going to have tight games. I think there's going to be close games. I think they're going to be low scoring games. So yeah, you're going to need some runs from someone, and they're going to have to produce them offensively. But this guy's going to close out 2 games if you win them. You're not going to blow this San Diego team out. You're not going to score a ton of runs off them. So it's going to come down to him getting potentially more than 3 outs twice. And that's what I see as being maybe most valuable for this team late in these games when they're tight. If they have a 1 or 2 run lead, this guy coming in and getting you 4, 5, maybe even 6 outs one of these games.
What's funny is I think in the 6 games that they've played, 5 of them, I believe, have been decided by 5 or more runs. Again, regular season means nothing. I just thought that was funny. Love that. Love that you went with a pitcher and especially a closer nonetheless.
Great.
I'm gonna go with the same guy I went with before Milwaukee because it worked. I'm gonna go with Pete. You're gonna have to put the ball out to win in the playoffs. It's that simple. Leaving guys on base ain't gonna do the trick here, honey. So you're gonna have to pop the ball out of the park. And if anyone's gonna do it, it's gonna be Pete. Worked the last time I said it before Milwaukee. He took a beautiful sinker or 2-seamer from Corbin Burns down and in and Said, see you later. Turned back to the catcher. Said, I'll take care of this one. So let's run it back, baby. Polar power.
I'm going to take the second best guy on the Mets when it comes to driving in runs from a home run perspective, at least, and that is Francisco Lindor. I think Lindor, especially, I've really been curious to see what he would do in postseason for the Mets since he arrived here. Unfortunately, they didn't have that in year one, but he has that experience, unlike Alonso and unlike some of these Mets hitters. So I'm really excited to see what Lindor can do, and I really can see him having a big series. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Take that, Richard Ward.
Let's see here. Juan Diaz, great member on the channel, says the Mets starting pitchers pitch to their ability. Sky's the limit. Let's start off Friday with a W. That's your birthday. Happy early birthday to you, Juan. Hoping for the exact same thing. That's great to see. We're going to take a couple more comments before we get out of here, guys. Let me see if there's any good ones in here. Give me 1 second.
Did you guys hear Keith, by the way, call in to the SNY booth?
That was fantastic. Yeah.
I didn't know.
I couldn't make out everything he was saying, but
was
he had
that
Gary
today?
and Ron cracking up. Yeah, it was today.
You couldn't make out everything he's saying? Why not?
Well, because he was on like speakerphone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure. You never know I don't know what Keith does in his off time. I mean,
Yeah, it was just
that guy's a pretty fun guy. I mean, yeah, you never know. I mean, who knows? He tends to get hurt a lot somehow. I don't know how he does it. But last year, I ended up doing some games because he was trying to pull some flowers or weeds out of something, and he slipped off his hot tub. I don't remember what happened. Busted up his toe. I ended up doing games because of that. Like this year, Blevins did some games because he can't keep himself upright. I don't know what his deal is.
ridiculous.
Let's see. Nicholas says here, also, since the establishment of the wild card, haven't the Mets fared better as a wild card with respect to making it all the way to the series? Might be better not having 5 days off, no rust. See, this is interesting because, yes, there is that factor for the Mets who have had success coming out of the wild card. However, I think in 2016, things did not go in the Mets' favor. And, of course, 2015, it was a different situation. So, for them, I think from a health perspective, there's rightful criticism as to why that might not be true, because I'm just thinking about Marte. I can't get that guy out of my head right now, knowing that he may very well not even be available for the series versus if you start in the NLDS. Is there any truth to that, though, when it comes to wild card production for the Mets, Joe?
So in the wild card era, they've made it. I'm going off the top of my head here. They've made the playoffs 5 times. 99, 2000, and 2016 were as wild cards. 2016, they got bounced. 2000, they went to the World Series. 99, I'm not quite sure which round they went to. I Bleav they went to the NLCS in 99 and lost. I'm not sure, though. I'd have to look that up, and my phone died a few minutes ago. But they've gone wild card to World Series once. It was 2000 in the middle of that Braves, division, like 15 straight year stretch. And they obviously, we all know how that World Series ended. They lost it. So yeah, I wouldn't say it being a wild card is necessarily in the Mets' favor. Obviously, about 2 days ago, I was saying the season's over, but after Rex go do it speech, just go do it. Go do it.
Got you guys. I got you ready to go, baby. Yeah.
I'm ready to fucking throw, man. I'm ready to get out there.
Rick, I need you to make like a hype speech over like a 5-minute span that I can just play on rerun as I'm attending the game Friday. I need that. I need those juices flowing. Got to make it happen.
I got you guys. Let's do it. I can give you a good rah-rah speech before the game in the dugout.
You're that guy, huh?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, more sarcasm than anything else, and that'll kind of get you going in a whole different kind of way. But yeah, we'll get it.
I love it. The dual psychology there, 2 approaches.
Shout out to Nina, my girlfriend, for the $2 donation. Every show she goes out of her way to drop the $1.99. She's, again, like I said, really going out of her way. Thank you so much for that, as always.
What's with the 99 cents? I noticed that a lot of people. Is that like a typical thing?
It's like a preset thing.
Is it like a gas price? Is that how it works? Like it's never a round number. There's always some nines in there. Right?
If gas prices were $1.99, I mean, we would be living in a much better world right now.
Like 2 years ago, they were.
I know. A lot has changed since then. That is for sure.
Nice of Nino. $1.99. I think that's more than an ex ever contributed to my relationship. I'm sure Keith could say the same, and I'm sure he would on air.
He probably can. Oh my God. All right. You know what, guys? I think that's a great way to wrap up the show because we're like $1:40 into this one. I want to thank everyone so much that chimed in for the latest episode of Bleav in Queens. episode 27, our first live show. And depending on, the results of this series, we may be doing more live shows throughout the postseason here in October on WardyNYM. And of course, everyone listening audio, I apologize if this was a little unorthodox for you. Again, that's just the nature of the game when you're doing a live show, interacting with 500 plus viewers this entire time. So Rex, starting with you, any final remarks before we get out of here?
Gosh, any final remarks? Honestly, I really am looking forward to see what the Mets end up doing with the starting rotation. Nothing is concrete. Nothing's been set in stone. The Mets have not announced what they're doing yet. I really hope they don't overlook the necessity of winning this series and try to be cute to get to the DS. We talked about it earlier, so I'm not going to harp on it, but that would be like really my biggest thing. And then aside from that, again, just score some runs. Score some runs. That's it. That's the name of this game right now for them. Put some runs on the board.
Joe?
Go do it. Go do it. Look, I've been the most optimistic guy, I feel like, in the world with this team all season long. And the script
until a couple days ago.
Past week, I've been the most pessimistic, right? So, I went from expecting this team, whereas Rec, you never expected this team necessarily to win the World Series, or at least never considered them favorites, to quote you.
Exactly.
They were my World Series favorites. No matter, whether the Dodgers had 115 wins or 105, didn't matter. Houston, Yanks, whatever. If the Mets got the division, if they got the bye, they were my World Series favorites, right? And that came crashing down, obviously. At this point, I've got no expectations. I'm not going to sit here saying this should happen, that should happen. Just go win some damn ball games. Play ball the way, they know how to do it. Most vet team, oldest team, most veteran savvy team in the league. Just go do the damn thing. I know. I'm working on
here, guys. Stay here. Don't do this with me. Come on.
It's easier said than done when you got the 15 years on me, Rick. I think that's what you develop between 24 and 39.
Oh, good. So
although, wait, for anyone who thinks that Rick is super even keeled, try texting him during a Penn State football game. Let me know how even.
He's literally just like me in my post-game shows. He's no different.
I don't know what you're talking about, Joe. I'm so just chill. Like, it doesn't matter if Clifford throws a pick or if the line can't block. Like, it's okay. I don't get upset.
No goddamn identity on this offense.
We need to get a hidden camera in there when Rex watching his games. We need to get a little live stream going. That'll be fun.
Oh, man. Big game this week. Big game this week, right?
Watch parties.
Bye this week.
This week. I got a bye week.
It's a bye, and then Michigan. And then it's Michigan, right?
It's a big game this week. Huge game. 1-0, as James Franklin says. 1-0 this week, baby. Let's go.
Isn't it Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio State after the bye?
Yes, starting next weekend. Yeah. Michigan, then Minnesota, then Ohio State. And I will be at that Ohio State game.
All right, guys. First game, right?
Yes. I'm very excited. Take her there. She's going to love it. It's going to be so much fun.
And my final remarks from Al Davis, just win, baby. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day, night, evening, whenever you're listening or watching this episode 27 of Bleav in Queens, and we will see you guys all again real soon.